alt delete that. I don't know really any way you would get rid of it. So the solution, I thought, was that someone should found a team of archivists who, when they discovered a site was going down, that they would go in and copy it all and then deal with the problem later. So that became Archive Team. We are going to rescue your shit. And the reason that it says we're going to rescue your shit was because I wanted it very clear that this was not going to be some happy-go-lucky, pleasantly themed, fun little group doing their best to bring together separate groups and so on. I did not want that. I didn't want that feel of the impotent academic saying something's wrong, and so I've started an investigation on a thing with this stuff. I wanted it that was like, we are a hostile force that will clean up your mess and make fun of you the whole time you're doing it and be available for you. That's a very specific position. And I realize it's not for everybody, but it was for a group of 50 to 60 people who assembled around me to start doing it. There is a group called the League of Movable Type. The League of Movable Type says fonts suck because they're the last group to really kind of understand their entire business model has gone to crap. But we're going to solve it by just coming up with brand new fonts for free and then putting them out for free with a lot of fanfare and attention so that people will realize, oh, I can have fonts for free that are actually pretty good quality. So they're very hostile, and we kind of like each other. We've talked to each other a lot. We get along. So what's going on here is there are some ideas that when we look back on them, we say this wasn't a very good idea at all. This one's a double vector. It's one of my favorites. It's an asbestos ad that uses the World Trade Center as an example of the usefulness of asbestos. And what it's saying here is like, you know, it's going to take 2 hours to get out of the World Trade Center, and asbestos will help you. All right, great. Whatever, Jason. That's really shocking, and I'm miserable. There's ideas that we look back now and we say, this is absolutely awful. This is a ad for slaves from 1861 that reads like a used car ad. The position that the guy takes is basically, I have high-quality slaves, people who can do seamstresses, they can be field hands, and I am a trustable service. Literally, like, trust me. People can tell you, I always give you the high-quality slaves. At which point, any person in the contemporary mind space will probably go, at what point do you not think you're trading in actual human beings that deserve as many rights as you have? Like he's gotten, it's one thing when it seems like some kind of uneducated guy is just like, well, I'll do whatever I can to make money, but this guy is trying to appeal to your intellectual sense that he is a good slave trader and you should buy his high-quality slaves. This disconnect between the contemporary mind space and that is what I'm getting here. Similarly, DDT is good for me. DDT causes cancer, by the way. Here it is being sprayed, as was often the case, on the beach in summer, directly into the children, to get rid of all those crazy-ass bugs. And in fact, there's even innovation where we have DDT wallpaper that you could put up easily to protect your children against insects by covering their entire nursery in DDT. By the way, anyone, don't do this. Okay, Magnolia. So in this contemporary mind space that we live in now, Magnolia went down. What's Magnolia? Magnolia was basically a bookmarking service. You could bookmark sites and share them with others and then comment on them. And one day they went down. But they went down because the organizer said, we're having real trouble with our backups. We're trying to fix it. Help us. Keep track of it. We're going to work on it. We're bringing this thing together. You know, here we go, Magnolia. And eventually they had to announce, yeah, sorry, totally unable to recover the database. All of your data is gone. There is no chance of it getting back. I'm so sorry. His name is Larry Half. Larry Half is a fuck. Let me explain why Larry Half is a fuck. Larry Half is a fuck because he had been running Magnolia since 2002. It was now 2009. Turned out that they were doing a single MySQL backup to a single database, but it wasn't actually backing up to that database for 5 years. And it was which means, therefore, they never tested it. They never tested a recovery. A backup is only half of a backup. A recovery is the other half of a backup. Just do it once, please. Didn't do it, okay? This was a community that was 100% user-generated content, okay? In other words, it was, to a mindset that is not contemporary, some of the most precious data you can find online. You know, we are very careful when we take organs out of people. We have a whole thing of getting that organ to where it needs to go for transplant. We have a whole variety of systems. We even have echoes of it in ambulances, the fact that any single person knows that when they hear an ambulance, they should get the fuck out of the way because something important is happening. Enough that we prosecute people who use ambulance noises when they're not supposed to. Like, this is something we all know. But to him, this user data was not important enough to check on backups and not do it for years and yet still benefit financially from it. He put up a podcast in its place where he was interviewed by somebody, a strange situation, where he said, mea culpa, mea culpa. But one of the things he said made me want to invent a more sensitive nutsack to punch him in. What he said was, you have to understand, we started this back in 2002, and people weren't really as critically, people did not consider backups as critical back then, and we didn't have as much knowledge about backups as we do now. And so we were unable, at that time, we were focused so much on providing such a great site that we weren't able to back up. But now, in today's world, we would know to back up. See, backups, the process of putting information on temporary storage devices that may or may not fail and coming up with contingencies for that failure and preventing data from being lost is an art that we have been doing for well over half of a century. We have been doing it for a long time, okay? So Larry Half is a fuck because he tried to apply for ignorance, but he's also an indicator of contemporary thought about this data. Similarly, there was a place called MetaPlace. MetaPlace was a Second Life wannabe run by Ralph Koster, who had been renowned as a games theoretician, who said, I'm going to create an open space where you can both create games and have environments, and I'm going to put together this thing, and we're going to have a player's Bill of Rights, and it was a lot of stuff that he had been talking about as a theory guy for years. So it went up one year, 2008, and it was around, and people tried it, and some liked it, some didn't, but it allowed you to upload all of your own works, allowed you to generate code, allowed you to do things. So on December 21st, 2009, he announced it was all going away in 9 days. What you're seeing here is his what's going to happen to my world and what's going to happen. Well, this says what's happening to my world. The answer is it's going away. How do I save my art objects? Painfully through a process of screen grabbing them. How do I save my scripts? Through a painful process of copy and paste. So I wrote an entry about them called Metafuckers. Called him out by name, called his community manager out by name, because I was like, you do not deserve to be anyone's community manager anymore. Because even if you think of a community manager as merely the PR mouth for an organization interacting with the human beings, there is, at least in some theory, some amount of ombudsman there that one could argue you might have, that you too would know your community probably doesn't want it in 9 days. Now, it was December 21st, and I said that they were shutting it down over Christmas. And I said, who wants, there was no button to say, export to zip. Why? Because contemporary thought says you don't need it. And why did they think 9 days was fine? Because 9 days is what contemporary thought said, who cares? 9 days, 30 days, 60 days, whatever you can do, hero. So just to be clear again, Ralph Koster is a fuck. There's his smiling face. And he was not, I wouldn't say, how do I say it? His response was the kind of gritted teeth, typed with 2 fingers response that I would have hoped, which was, Jason, we don't seem to see eye to eye on this, and I understand that. And I'm sure the fact that I was just calling him this terrible thing. What I liked was his community manager said, it's not over Christmas. It's 9 days. You know, to her it was like, 21st, not the 25th. Great, awesome. That's just beautiful. So I want to take one little side thing to mention something about zealotry and causes. Okay, what you're hearing from me is that bombastic, gridded mouth sound verse of somebody who's on a cause, who has some sort of zeal for something, and it's one of the most off-putting, boring things you can deal with if it's not something you're interested in. If you're not as pissed off about vegetable farming as somebody else is, or if you don't agree that motorcycles should have more of the road, or you don't like the lack of bike lanes or something else, and this person is just frothing at the mouth about it, I understand. And I've never tried to indicate that it's bad of people to not agree with where I'm going with this and why it suddenly took such an interest in me. When we started up Archive Team, one of the things we said was, let's just be crazy, and we started to put up something called the Death Watch. And we just started going after all these places and saying, this place, they haven't updated any of their data in a year, they're gonna probably die. This group over here, I don't know what you're thinking, they did this. Okay, they just went down, we were gonna put them up. We would take a screen grab of them shutting down because we knew they would delete it and their parent company would act like that thing never existed. A good example of that, for instance, is Google Catalogs, which there's no record of there ever having been a Google Catalogs. Google's shared meta place thing, which was called Lively. When I've given interviews about what Archive Team is up to, I talk about Google Lively again as one of these contemporary Larry Half is a fuck kind of things, because what happened was Google Lively said, yeah, we're taking this thing down. You have a couple weeks. Please go and take as many screenshots of what you created as you need. And I said that was equivalent to, we are going to burn down your house in 2 weeks, but you can go through all the windows and take as many photographs of your stuff before it goes down. All right? But the thing is this is all acceptable behavior. And why is it all acceptable behavior? Because that's kind of where we've gone with it. It used to be a miracle that we could store data at all. The fact is, and I'm not making this thing up out of my head, there was a study or a demonstration that showed that the way that a hard drive works is like the hard drive head going over the density of data we have now is the equivalent of a 747 able to go Mach 2, stop on a dime, and read what is written on blades of grass. You know, that is where we've gotten. That's a miracle. That is awesome. And it's awesome that we can store so much data. And it was so cool when we had websites in the early 90s, the fact that you could just hook it up, and through a wide variety of machinations and a lot of personal pain, we could set up websites that allowed people to come in and read our data in full color, a concept which was really unto forward. One of the things I say is that some people would put up websites, and they would have the largest audience of anybody in their genetic line, right? You'd have somebody put up a website, and if it got read by 5,000 or 10,000 people, that might be more than anything written by anyone who was ever related to them. It was an unbelievable thing that we did this, that just the way it happened, it was just great. The amount of people that it opened up the world to. And did they make shitty sites? Yes, they did, but it was their first site. What do you do? How's your first written story when you get to put it up? Not so great. It's usually about you in your room and you win, but you had these locations that came up in the 90s that suddenly were these miraculous things. Well, they've been around for about 20 years. One of them is Yahoo GeoCities, previously known as GeoCities, previously known as GeoPages, previously known as Beverly Hills Internet, which was a big, huge site that had been purchased by Yahoo for the unbelievable number of $3.6 billion in 1999, and was, at the time that it was purchased, the third most browsed site on the internet. It was a really big deal that it was purchased by Yahoo. But Yahoo announced they were closing it. Now, the way they announced it was also unbelievably shitty. Buried in one of their tech support documents was something saying, by the way, we're closing. And a bunch of us started to make noise about, like, dude, they're closing. Why are they closing? And then suddenly, a few months later, they officially put up a thing going, by the way, we're closing. We're going to close in a few months, and we're going to go down, and thank you. you have the option of paying some money